Hey everyone, this is Asia Wild. I'm the president of the West Jordan Chamber of Commerce. And the West Jordan Chamber of Commerce is a business association made up of the businesses in West Jordan City and surrounding areas. And part of my role here at the Chamber of Commerce is government relations and making sure that the interests of business is taken care of as far as the government goes. And those of you that have been following our page for a while know that we've had some concerns with business license fees in the city of West Jordan. There's some proposals happening. Just to give a real quick recap of the events thus far, the state of Utah recently passed a law that said that you can't charge home-based businesses a business license fee unless you can prove that the cost to service that business is over and above what it would be to serve a regular residential home. And then the second part of that law was you can't charge a business license fee based on number of employees, that it had to be based on the business class. So what the city of West Jordan did was they commissioned a study by Zions Financial to look at what the costs of the cost of doing business licenses is in the city. Now, the businesses believe that the study is flawed because the costs that they included in that were police and fire. And so in this video, we're going to go over a couple of different things. West Jordan City had a work meeting last night here at City Hall in the council chambers, and I kind of want to give a summary of what West Jordan City discussed, also outline our major concerns with what was discussed, and talk about the ideas that were shared at the meeting, where each council member stands on the issue, and the next steps. So they had a city council meeting about this, and the Chamber of Commerce had expressed some concern about the way that the business license fees were being assessed. The business license fees are currently, anywhere from $100 to $600, depending on the business, and some of the business license fees for certain businesses in the city of West Jordan would be well over $5,000 if this proposal passes. So pretty significant increase. So obviously we're very concerned. The Chamber of Commerce has been diligently advocating with the city of West Jordan, trying to mitigate some of the effects of this proposed change. They had a city council meeting a couple of weeks ago about it, and that what they decided to do was have a work meeting. And in that city council meeting, they decided to invite the Chamber of Commerce to this work meeting. I'm not 100% sure why they invited us. They didn't give us an opportunity to speak. So that was kind of frustrating and felt kind of disingenuous to be invited and then not have an opportunity to have a voice at the table. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and summarize our concerns here through this format, through Facebook Live, because it is it's a lot of typing, and I've been told my emails are boring, and so hopefully my Facebook Lives are a little more exciting. We have two major concerns with the current proposal. One, it's based on police and fire, which is already being paid for through property taxes and sales tax, which a large portion of the sales tax revenue and the property tax revenue comes from the businesses. So the businesses are already paying in to the police and fire, and so we feel like to assess business license fees based on the cost of police and fire is kind of a double taxation, that we're already paying that. So that's the heart of the argument, that the fees which are not subject to the taxpayer Bill of Rights are intended to defray costs that are associated with a particular government service, like processing business licenses. A tax is designed to raise revenues to defray general expense of government. We feel like police and fire is a general expense of government, and therefore should be a tax and not a fee. And if the fees pay for expenses other than processing business license fee, then it's a tax and it should be voted upon by the public. So that's our biggest concern. And so one of the words that's being used in this discussion by West Jordan City is that it's the costs of business licensing are being subsidized. And we find that word particularly offensive as a business community, given that the business community pays a lot in property taxes and sales tax as well. We have some letters from some of our businesses, and along those lines, ABC Great Beginnings, which is a daycare that's located here in West Jordan, they have a couple of locations, and they pointed out that of the two relatively small business properties that we are taxed on in West Jordan, almost $10,000 goes directly to the city to cover the police and fire and other costs per year. So they're already paying into those expenses, and so to be charged again for those expenses in the form of business license fees is really difficult for the businesses to do. And not only that, they find it a bit offensive when certain city members of West Jordan City government are referring to it as a subsidy. They feel they're giving the impression that the citizens are subsidizing the business licensing fees, which is not true at all. The second concern that we have is the way that these business license fees are being allocated. It doesn't account for the size of the business. In any given industry, there is a wide variety of different sizes of business, and gyms are a great example. In this proposal, gyms would be charged as much as $5,000 per year for a business license fee, and that would include anything from a Vasa to a CrossFit gym. Now, if you've ever run a business or anything like that before, you'd know that $5,000 a year for a business license fee for something like a CrossFit gym would be not only a hardship, but I would argue that if it's a new gym, that it would probably put them right out of business. That would be a cost that they just wouldn't even be able to sustain. Some of the other concerns and questions that we've had is, what is the increase for? What's driving this, other than, trying to come into compliance with the state law that I mentioned earlier? What are these additional revenues going to cover? The costs that are in the study just seem to apply to police and fire, and so it's the city of West Jordan just recently raised property taxes to hire additional police and fire, so that should be covered through the property taxes, which the businesses also pay into. A large portion of the property tax revenue and all of the sales tax revenue comes through the businesses. So, that's a big concern, that seems to have already been covered by the Truth in Taxation hearing that they just had on raising property taxes. The other thing is they don't really know how much revenue they're already collecting from business license fees. In the discussion last night, there was a $400,000 number thrown out and a $200,000 number thrown out, and nobody seems to be really clear on exactly how much revenue they're currently collecting in business license fees. Somebody did mention that there is $200,000 in the current budget projected for business license fees. So my guess is that's about how much they're collecting. The other thing is nobody could answer the question on how much it costs them to process the business license fees. And we've talked to the state legislator who sponsored this bill, that said that you couldn't charge business license fees without justifying the cost. And he was appalled that it was, being used in this way, that the law was being interpreted in this way. And he's currently working with attorneys to make some changes to the law to prevent this sort of thing from happening. But in the meantime, some of the concerns that are being voiced at this point by City Council is just coming in compliance with the law. But it could, the current proposal would generate significantly more revenue, I suspect, than merely coming into compliance with the law. And the worst, not just worried about generating more revenue, we're worried about the impact that this is going to have on small businesses particularly. A lot of the fees that will change for large businesses will actually go down, and the concern is the large businesses will get a little bit of a reduction. Some of them in most industries, like I say, gyms is one of those that just really skyrockets. But where it's going to hit hard, the biggest increases, 200%, 500%, 600%, 2,000% increases are going to hit the small businesses. And so that's of course the biggest concern. Each council member's take on this proposal in last night's work meeting were kind of interesting. Kayleen Whitelock actually came up with a really excellent idea, a great point. She said, this is an opportunity to evaluate these business license fees and maybe have some lower fees for businesses that we want to attract to the city, and kind of incentivize the businesses that we want to have in the city. And this was a great point that got largely ignored or brushed over, or they never really went anywhere with that idea, except that Dirk Burton pointed out that they did have a vote to, in the past to waive fees for a certain business that they wanted to bring to the city, and then of course that business ended up bringing in a lot of revenue in sales tax for the city, and so they had a special vote for that. But they really didn't take any action on that idea, which was kind of disappointing. Councilmember Lamb, he did mention that he was concerned about the way that the current proposal was worded and the way that it was set up, and that he definitely thought it warranted a deeper look. Alan Anderson was mostly concerned about just fitting the classes into one sheet of paper, having boiling down the business classes to just a short list so that it's easy to fill out and easy to know where where your business would fit in there. He also, brought up, making sure that the city complies with the state law. But clearly there was some confusion there on what the state law required. He felt like these disproportionate fees for police and fire were included in the law, and they're not. The law stated two things. The first one, which I mentioned before, which was saying that you can't charge a home-based business a fee unless you can prove that it costs you more to service that location than a regular residence. And then number two, no longer charging based on the number of employees. Now they have to charge based on the business class. It doesn't say anything about disproportionate fees or how you determine those costs or anything. That was solely West Jordan City's take on how to determine the costs of serving those businesses. Councilman Burton, mentioned that he would like to incentivize new businesses by saying, if you're a new business to West Jordan, your business license fees would be reduced for the first year and then increase gradually over time to eventually bring you up to a full business license fee. I've got to do some research into that because he got shot down right away. There were several other council members that immediately said, no, you can't do that. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, so I'll have to investigate that a little bit further. Councilman McConaughey really kind of focused on wanting more detailed information and a spreadsheet to determine the impact that the new fee schedule would have on individual businesses. The concern with staff about that was that it would take a lot of data, that there's over 3,000 businesses in the city of West Jordan, and that would take they'd have to gather a lot of data in order to get that spreadsheet put together. But he kind of wanted to play with the percentages of disproportionate fees, which is the police and fire, and see how that would impact individual businesses. There's a couple of problems with that. As I mentioned before, those police and fire costs are already covered through property taxes and sales tax, so it's still a double taxation. Any conversation surrounding disproportionate fees that are based on the fire and police would be inappropriate because those are already covered. The other problem with that is they mentioned, the amount of data that it would take to evaluate the impact on various businesses. One of the solutions they came up with for doing that was to do an industry average. They mentioned banks specifically. They said we have 58 banks or something in West Jordan City, and to list every individual bank and analyze each one of those would just take a ton of time. So can we just do an average? And they said, McConaughey said, oh yeah, just take an average. Well, if you take an average, you're comparing Mountain America Credit Union that has two buildings that have several thousand square feet to Chartway Credit Union, who just has one little location. And you're taking an average and applying that fee and assuming that fee is going to have the same impact on Chartway as it does on Mountain America. So there's some really flawed assumptions in that course, which is ultimately the course that they decided to take at the end of the work meeting, was to the next time that they meet on December 1st at 5:30 was to go through this spreadsheet that's based on these police and fire numbers that are already covered through other funds that the businesses pay into. And then to use these averages, these industry averages that would totally defeat the purpose of determining the impact on small businesses. So not sure I agree with the methodology at all there. Mayor Riding, he just asked about the penalty, about being out of compliance with state law. And thus far hasn't really given any kind of indication as to what his thoughts are on this process. So I don't know if he's in support of this or where he stands on this at all. Councilman Jacob, who was not there at the work meeting, he has made it clear in the past that he's in favor of completely eliminating business license fees. He doesn't think the city generates enough revenue from business license fees to make an issue out of it, or to spend this much time and effort and all these resources trying to figure out the most equitable way to do it. So even though he wasn't at that particular meeting, he has been very strongly expressed his opinion on that in the past. So like I say, the next meeting is going to be on December 1st at 5:30, and the council will meet in the council chambers to look at this spreadsheet and have more discussion based on metrics that the business community believes are flawed. We have several letters from businesses, and every business that has taken a look at these fees and the way that they were determined has mentioned that they really feel like the premise is flawed. And so passing along that information from the business community, just want to maybe share some of those thoughts. You know, a lot of letters from the business community are mentioning that they already pay for fire and police through property taxes and sales tax, and that the city, you know, recently enacted that higher property tax to pay for fire and police. Some of them are bringing up the fact that Riverton has 0 business license fees. That's how Riverton decided to deal with the new state law. A lot of them are bringing up double taxation and having to pass along. Some of them are saying they would have to pass along the additional fees to their customers. Others are saying, let's see, I have one here where he says an increase in our business license fee, or any increase for that matter, will most certainly be unreasonable and puts a huge hardship on my business. I can't pass that kind of increase on to my customers. Our margins are already razor thin. This could cause me to consider locating to another city with more reasonable fees, but then I'd have a hard time selling my building because no one is going to want to move in with fees like that. So definitely some huge concerns on the part of the business community. Several of them pointed out that they don't get a break. Businesses don't get a break on property taxes like residents do. Residents get about a 45% discount on their property taxes. You know, there's like a certain amount that is waived on the valuation, and so residents get a little break, but businesses don't get that break. Another point that one of the businesses brought up, which is kind of scary, is they said, okay, if business license fees are going to be based on the cost of police and fire to my business, then maybe what could potentially happen is businesses that just deal with a potentially dangerous situation themselves rather than calling a first responder, which I hadn't thought about that, but if that's the perception that business license fees are going to be based on police and fire, yeah, that could cause kind of a problem. A lot of them feel like police and fire is a burden that should be shared by all of the public. That the businesses shouldn't be expected to shoulder the costs of a system that is there to protect all of the public. That's more of an appropriate thing for property taxes to cover. So here's an interesting perspective from one of our businesses. He says, excessive fees cripple businesses. We pay property tax, sales tax, state income tax, gasoline tax, and federal tax. We have workers' compensation insurance, liability insurance, health insurance, vehicle insurance, equipment insurance. All of these costs impact our bottom line and are deemed overhead and impact our ability to grow our businesses, employ individuals, and provide positive goods and services to the community. He goes on to say that they've just raised sales tax, property tax, gasoline tax, as well as increased costs across the board for all insurances. We need a break from all of these increases. So very good points there, that there has just been a barrage of increases in insurance and taxes overall across the board in many different environments, and to impose these additional increases on businesses now would definitely be a hardship. And not only that, it seems to be completely unwarranted. So we'll keep you posted as to what happens in the coming weeks between now and December 1st, or if nothing develops between now and December 1st, we'll let you know what happens on December 1st. If you have any questions, please call the Chamber of Commerce. You can email us at info@westjordanchamber.com, or you can comment on this video. We'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of our ability. And if we can't, refer you to the right resources, and happy to help as always. So please ask questions if you have any. Thank you. Have a great day.